All right, welcome everybody to episode number 2 of Draft on Tap. That's Adam and Eva, the co-host. I'm Big Doug, and our guest today is Thor Nystrom. Thor, thanks for doing this in the middle of a blizzard, no doubt.
Thanks for having me, boys. I always enjoy talking to you.
Absolutely. Thor, is this the one? Are you coming up on 1 year at Fantasy Pros now?
Yeah, it'll be 1 year in the summer. But yeah, this like my first, I did the first college football season. That was my first draft process. So all that stuff's been super fun.
How did you get into the college type scouting type? There's so many lanes that you can get into in the spaces. How did you end up in this one? And what is your process of kind of going through these prospects?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a buddy that lives like a mile from me, and he does. He's like he does a Vikings podcast or whatever. And this year, for the first time, he went to the Senior Bowl, and now he's been watching film, and so it's kind of cute. Like he'll call me or text me like after he watches a guy, and so like last night he watched Deion Henley, from Washington State, and so then he's like texting me his takes, and he was like, "Dude, this is so fun." And in response to your question, that thing that he's feeling like, sort of getting seduced by the evaluation process, that was a bug that I caught when I was a kid. Like I've been sick for this stuff for as long as I can remember. Like my mom makes fun of me because I used to do mock drafts on these like little pieces of paper in the basement. And then she would like have to clean it up, I guess, because I wouldn't throw some of the pieces of paper away. Maybe I had bad drafts or whatever. But anyhow, it's like from the jump. And then I wanted, like, when I went to college and everything, like, this is what the job I have now, that's what I want to do. So, like, I wanted to go to a D1 college. So even though I was from up in northern Minnesota, I ended up going to University of Kansas because it wasn't just getting into the journalism school, wasn't just getting into sports journalism. I wanted to go to a school big enough where the team I was covering, where it could be big enough news where the news could get outside of the campus. And I was fortunate enough, I got to cover a national title basketball team at Kansas, also an Orange Bowl winning team at Kansas. Their football team happened to win the Orange Bowl when I was there. They beat Virginia Tech. I keep Talib, Chris Harris, be some of the names that the NFL fans would know from that team. But then, and then from there, it was just, you sort of, go up. And I was always sort of gunning to get into the college football coverage and the NFL draft coverage. And I was fortunate enough, probably 5 or 6 years into my time at NBC, where I was able to get shifted over into that, because it just so happened at the start of my career in baseball, just because that's what I was given, and sort of beggars can't be choosers. And I don't hate baseball, but my very first big opportunity out of college was getting an internship with MLB.com covering the Minnesota Twins, which is like, my hometown team or whatever. Right. So that was awesome. But then the next opportunity I got was at NBC, of course, covering baseball, because it was coming off of that. Not my first love, like I said, but I did that for 4 or 5 years. And then I had told my boss for a long time, like, if anything ever comes up with college football or NFL draft, like, I'm your dude. And unfortunately it did. And at that point, it was pounding the pavement, because this is the stuff where I can just do it for 12 hours every day. I mean, like, not every day, but like I can, like it's because it doesn't feel like work to me. So
how many prospects are you doing each season?
Like as far like every draft season?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, probably eval out to some degree or another 650, 700. Wow. Yeah, and surface level looking into more than that. Like in my database, like 1,100 or so. Like I would have to see the final numbers on this class, but typically that's somewhere where it's around. And then of course you don't have time to get to everybody or like watch all the guys that are way down. But I put out the 500 player big board every year with the 500 comps, like a week before the draft or whatever. And it's really important to me that like the 500 guys I have up there, that at least it's the guys that I feel the most confident in, and that the order of it and everything like that. And so I want to at least make sure out of the 11 or 1,200 guys that I've picked out my 500, and that I have a really strong idea about those guys, and that they're stacked exactly how I want them.
And how many, before we get to the question, how much tape, how many games are you watching per prospect?
Well, it's funny. A lot of the guys that do this, they covered the NFL or the, stuff like that. They don't do it from like I come from the different perspective where I cover college football. Like that's what I do in the falls. And I've been doing that now for years. And so I watch all these guys live and I cover them like during the day. Like college football is all I do the other part of the year. So I already have this ridiculous amount of contacts. I don't know anyone in the country that watches more college football than me. So I already have that context heading in. During the process, a lot of the skill guys I can watch in my head. That what I'm trying to do with those guys, it's augment. Like for instance, with the receivers, when you're watching on television, they run out of the screen pretty quick, so you don't get to see the routes, right? You get to see the ball skills because you know what the camera is going to show. What you get to see them with the ball after the catch, and stuff like that. But I want to see them running the route. So like I'll seek out the all 22, right? But I'm not watching their full stuff because I already seen those guys a billion times, right? Or with the quarterbacks, I want their all 22 seeing the field progression because that's something I can't get from the other thing. The one that I'm going through, like the NFL guys who have to come back in for all the guys, where it's similar for me, the trench guys and the defenders, because like, when you're watching the others, like, you need that, and with those guys, it's 3 to 4 to 5. I mean, like it depends on the situation. So some of the guys, it's pretty apparent pretty quickly. And then some of the guys, based on the context, you need a little bit more. Like for instance, you guys remember Frank Ragnow?
Oh yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, like Frank Ragnow, when you watch his tape when he was coming out of Arkansas, like if you just picked a random smattering of like 3-4 games his last season, you'd have like up down, like whatever. And if you didn't know the context of his situation, he was playing through a high ankle sprain that year, and so like he had some tough matchups with that, and his game played way down. In situations like if you know the context, then you could seek out the additional film and stuff like that. You augment it like that. So it just depends on the prospect. But the guys that I don't have the exposure to, again, specifically the defenders and the offensive linemen, those guys, it's anywhere between 3 to 5, and some of them you need a couple more.
Right. From reading your stuff, I know you're pretty well known for Army edge Andre Carter. I think coming into the Senior Bowl, I think hopes were high. I've even seen people have him in his top 100 even earlier. He didn't do himself any favors, through that process. Do you think that he's gonna still be in that top 100 range, or do you think he's really fallen on a lot of draft boards from that performance?
At least to my eyes, I have to assume that the evaluators from the NFL were seeing what I was seeing. I think he fell out of that at least I wouldn't take him there now. Now, the thing he's got going for him, the thing that was like the reason that people were excited about him, he was born in a body that like God doesn't give bitty edge defenders, right? Like he's how built in a lab, I guess is the cliche. And it's not just like the frame of it. He's also long, and he's also pretty athletic on the outside. But he has this like the build in conjunction with his play style. Sometimes it can manifest as sort of like Bambi on ice against the run in terms of setting the edge. Like the things that he's good at, it's attacking the offensive tackles out the edge as a pass rusher, just coming downhill like that, descending really quickly, and then using the athleticism and the length to get around the corner. And then because his levers are so long, his legs are so long, it's like 3 steps and he's at the quarterback, and he's got like this, the tackling rate. It's like a huge fishing net of a tackling rate. It's because of the levers, but against the run, he doesn't have the play strength. It's not just that he doesn't have the play strength. It doesn't appear that he's put in. I don't want to say the work, because he obviously does not struggle with work ethic, but he needs work in that area. Struggles with the play strength because he's a very angular, high cut type player. But there's things that he could do to get better at setting the edge and just sort of run defense in general that I haven't seen yet. Like I didn't see it on the film at Army. Like when Army played a dog crap schedule every year, like they always play one of the worst because they can pick their schedule. So they always rank like 130th, 129th, 131st in the nation in strength of schedule out of 131 teams. And he struggled against the run against those teams. And then he goes to the Senior Bowl, and you're hoping he's come up with a better plan, and he hasn't. He just gets washed out. And a part of it is his initial path out of the gates. Like he's looking to gain that advantage on the offensive tackle for his pass rush plan. It's the thing that he cares about. But a lot of times he gives up gap integrity because of that aggressive first step. You know, the guy's so, you know, he built so long and everything like that. He can get off balance really easy, where now you can just start shoving him to the one side. And when you consider the lack of play strength and you know, how high off the ground he is, he also plays too high, in my opinion. It gets really easy to just wash him out of plays for one guy. And so he needs to get better against the run as far as the NFL stuff. Right now, I would see him as a situational edge rusher. But to your question specifically about the draft equity right now, the top 100, or like where is he going to go? The bad news was the Senior Bowl for Andre Carter. Right. The good news for him is the athletic profile and the frame and the measurables, and almost assuredly getting in front of the teams in the interviews, stuff like that. That's where he's going to shine. The NFL Combine will be Andre Carter's event. If he goes out and dominates those tests, I think that's where he could potentially convince a team of like, oh, this guy's worth it on day 2, because we can use him as a situational edge rusher immediately with that athletic profile, and we can work with him and try to build him up into the rest.
So it feels like for years, decades, whatever, that edge rusher, you know, was like the second, third most important position on the field. It feels like the interior D-line is starting to make, you know, headway into taking that over. Do you feel the same thing? Like, I mean, I feel like we are valuing interior tackles more and more every year.
I think it's a great point, and I do agree. Yeah, and maybe a part of it that is schematic changes. You know, we always talk about schematic changes on offense and how the game is evolving in terms of that. It's also doing the same thing on defense. We just don't talk about it as announcers don't talk about it as much. So, you know, some of the fans, we don't know about it as much, but your point is really well taken. I think in the past, defensive linemen, they were used more to occupy different stuff like that. We now, and also it's not just that, but like the NFL, they weren't, maybe a little penned in their idea of like the import of that position, like you're sort of alluding to. But when you started to see the value of some of those game wrecking interior players, where it's like, it's not just analogous to the dominant edge rushers, but it's like, it actually might be more like, you know, Aaron Donald being an obvious example for my neck of the woods, like going way back, John Randall. Right. But like, you know, yeah, like, you know, and you know, interior pressure destroys offenses. It's the quickest way to blow things up. Again, going to my backyard, the Vikings lost to the Giants in the playoffs in large part because their defense couldn't stop anyone. But outside of that, it was because Dexter Lawrence blew up the backfield immediately every single play. Dexter Lawrence was like, Garrett Bradbury, get out of my way. And that was the half second after the quarter second after the snap. And then he was immediately in Cousins' face. It's really difficult to do stuff there. Or he's hitting Dalvin Cook or forcing Dalvin Cook, you know, a different path than the rest of the guys are blocking or whatever. It's a way to wreck offensive game plans. And that's why, for me, Jalen Carter is the clear top non-quarterback in this class. That's why I would take if I was the Bears.
And is it ridiculous that we're hearing things about his character? Do we have to do that every year? With somebody?
Am I allowed to swear on this?
Sure.
What Todd McShay said about Jalen Carter was fucking bullshit. Yeah. It was unprofessional. It was unbecoming. And I think it borderline fireable if Todd McShay cannot back up the things that he said before the national title game about Jalen Carter's character without giving any specifics, without alluding to any sort of source, just tossing out vague like, oh, Jalen Carter, yeah, he has character issues, and you guys are going to hear about, you know, he's a problem in the locker room, and people can't get along with him, and you know, I'm just warning you guys, you know, like all this sort of vague stuff without hitting on it, irresponsible. And if he can't back that up with specifics or allude to specific sources that have given that, point to a specific situation, I don't know. Like you can't do that. You just
to your point, Thor, that's not some rando on Twitter. You know what I mean? Like that's supposed to be a professional journalist. And listen,
I think a rando on Twitter would have more fucking integrity than that. If I'm being honest, like that, really low. And the other thing I'll say about it is I've tried to dig on this Carter thing because when McShay said that, it was one of those things in the industry where it's like, wait, what? You're like, wow, okay, I guess Jalen Carter is some sort of problem child, and I just never heard about it. Like, okay, so you start talking to people, they haven't heard it. Then you're asking more people. You go to the Senior Bowl, you're like, if you heard anything about Carter, you heard about anything about Carter? Like, it's Carter. I haven't heard one thing that not only that doesn't corroborate, I haven't heard anything that even comes close to anything that would hint that way at all. Like anything that any person I've talked to, anything I've read, like there's nothing yet. Todd McShay is the only person who is putting this out. Now, if Todd McShay has if he has some kind of information, if he got some sort of steel dossier back there, he got 2 months to put it out. Right. Otherwise, he got 2 months to put out the public retraction. Yeah. It's one or the other. But the thing he said, nobody else that I am aware of has that information. So it is what it is.
You know, I know a guy that you're pretty well versed in, and I'm intrigued in, is Washington State, Deion Henley, the transfer. Yeah. What I'm questioning is, you know, he's raw in a lot of aspects. So, you know, you can still see in this game. But in a draft where Mike linebackers might not be the premium, you know, do you think he can be that legitimate Mike linebacker on the next level? Or is that something that's going to probably take him time? You know, have to, you know, get his bones on special teams in other ways, or even, you know, strong side weak side.
Yeah, year one potentially could start. I'm not going to put it past him that he could not start on a defense in year one. And maybe that's because, again, alluding to where I'm coming to you from in Minneapolis, the Vikings, the Vikings are a team that their linebacking core, Kendricks and Jordan Hicks. There's a real scenario where they cut both of them, and they had drafted this kid, Brian Asamoah, last year. Yeah, I think the Vikings, if they, and I think they would be interested in Henley, to be honest with you. He seems like a good fit with Flores. If that were to happen, that would be a team where I like if they got Henley on later on day two, you know, something like that. I think he then could come in and start on day one. There are other teams around the league where I think that they, you know, like some of the teams that are that have like the better linebacker, they might be drafting him as the contingency plan of like, we have the veteran who has one more year on the contract. We know he's not going to be brought back, but to your point, we can get Henley. He can be used situationally in year one. Right. He's very good in coverage already, because, you know, in part because of the athleticism, and he's got better instincts than you'd think for how early he is to that position. Obviously, he was a position convert. He started his career at Nevada at a different position, everything like that. And then he finally got over to, he's only been a full-time linebacker, I believe, for 2 years.
Yep.
He's only been 2 years. Yeah. And has it been defense for 3, I think, right? But
he moved around a little bit. Yeah. But it's been really just a linebacker for just about not even two full seasons from what I was reading. But because when Nevada initially moved him to defense, like, because it's like he's a very exciting physical package and he's an aggressive kid, but like they didn't know what to do with him, and so they played him on the edge a little bit, they played him at linebacker a little bit, they played him in safety a little bit, they put him the nickel defender for a little bit, but then like when they just put him at linebacker full time, he took off, and then last year he really took off when he transferred to Wazoo for his last season. But I am bullish on the kid. The Vikings had taken a couple of years ago a converted quarterback, a position convert at linebacker in Chaz Surratt, who did not work out. And I hope people don't get skittish about Henley because of the Chaz Surratt thing. They're not similar really at all. I mean, outside of the, we only played linebacker for a couple of years thing, and we had a lot of tackles in college, and we're both pretty athletic. The similarities basically end there. Surratt, his arms were like comically short, like alligator arms to the infinity. Like I forget what his measurements were, but it was like, it might've been like 28-inch arms or like something like that. And this manifested in his college tape. He missed a metric ton of tackles. He would get there, but he just missed so many tackles. And then Chaz Surratt stunk in coverage at UNC. Like he was an adventure, and it's like, oh, this he's athletic and he's a former quarterback, but
he does not seem to have any instincts for this work, and that carried over to the next level. Henley, that is not the case. First of all, Henley is a reliable tackler. Second of all, his coverage instincts are there. Like, it's that part of it is coming along and coalescing very quickly. The thing you're curious about with him, it's like the play strength thing. It's the thing of like picking through traffic, and then like, he confronts a running back in the hole, like a big one. Is he going to be able to knock that guy back? When we were at the Senior Bowl, this was one of the, I think this was on, it was on Tuesday, in fact, because this moment he met, so Henley had diagnosed his play correctly in the team drills, and he met Roschon Johnson head on right in the hole. He read the thing perfectly, flowed perfectly. Everything was perfect. But in them practices, once they reach the contact point, the defender basically just, it's like a light wrap, but then he lets go or whatever. I would have loved to have seen the battering ram of Roschon Johnson going into that hole, and then Henley going full speed into him. And who's emerging victorious there? Would Roschon have run him over? Would Henley have knocked him back? That would have been interesting from the play strength perspective. But with Henley, I have far less questions. I didn't like Surratt coming out. I didn't. Henley, I like. So I have far less questions about him. And he's going to be a special teams demon immediately. And I do think there's some teams where he's going to be able to start immediately. Definitely not all of them, though, for sure.
What are some other guys that you're looking at Mike linebacker? Because I can see, as far as first round, we're not seeing too many that are, even jumping out. Probably more in that day 2, even later ranges. There's some other guys that are popping out to you.
Yeah, my probably my favorite one is Jack Campbell. I am a little biased because I am an Iowa grad. I love his game. I don't miss a snap of Iowa football. And Jack Campbell's a guy that, we had heard about him before we even really got to like truly see him, because he was shredding the practices, and then there was like the COVID season, and and then he was at the mono or like something like that.
Weird stuff, yeah.
Yeah, so we didn't get to see him as much early, but like the reports coming out of like the practices, it was like the guy was the Loch Ness monster. It's like, this guy is amazing. This guy's a banshee. The way that Ferentz would talk about him, it's like, man, Ferentz doesn't even talk about like the guys that go in the first round of the draft, like this kid that we've barely seen before. And then he shows up on the field, and they were right. That's exactly what he is. Like, we with Iowa, we've seen all these different middle linebackers that are good over, Josie Jewell was one of them. And there's a whole bunch that you could go through. Campbell to me is the next level of some of these guys. I don't think he's unathletic. He's not Trenton Simpson in terms of athleticism, but he's not unathletic. He's athletic enough for what he needs to do, and he's got an awesome frame, and the play strength is good too. He's a natural processor of the field. I guess is the biggest thing I would say. It's like, like we talk about this more with quarterbacks of like, oh, he's a natural in the pocket, and he just processes so quick. The decisions are so quick. That's Jack Campbell. It's like the guy was like born in on his spot in the second level of the field, and he's never left it. Anything the offense does, it's like da-da, and his brain's like, okay, that's what's going to happen there. That's what's going to happen there. That guy's going to be there quick. It's like Tom Cruise in his Minority Report, where he's got like all the things up there, he's moving it. That's Jack Campbell on every play. He is the super processor. He so rarely is caught out of position, even on plays where you think he may have made a mistake. You go back and watch it, you're like, oh yeah, he didn't make a mistake. That was his key right there. That's why he did that. The other guy screwed up. So like, I can't say enough about him. I love the kid's game. He's going to get drafted beneath where he should go. Probably not like crazy lower, but like he is going to be a value for sure, just because of the position he plays.
That's one of the things that Commanders fans, when you ask them, are worried about the tight end position. Got to get a tight end.
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily sure I agree with that. I'm curious your thoughts on some tight ends the Commanders have now, that being Bates when he came out from Boise State. And Cole Turner. The two guys they had there that I'm higher on than I think maybe other guys are. Where did you see those guys coming out?
Yeah, Bates I thought was a little, actually, I mean, sort of both those guys I thought were like slightly underrated. It's not like, but not difference makers, right? Like both sort of good pieces to have in the room, but You know, like I'm not sure I would like trust them to like be the dude. Turner, his process, I wasn't sure was like super duper fair to him because like, you know, in college he'd done all this different stuff and he was good and whatnot. And then we went to last year's Senior Bowl, and the first like couple of days he was just moving a little bit slower. And I think he was trying to do like different stuff, improve the scouts on this and that, and doing stuff that wasn't on his film, which was great. But it was like he was unnecessarily trying to extend himself, I think, and he sort of didn't acquit himself well, and it hurt his entire pre-draft process. And I think that's what happened to him last year. But like those guys, I think that's a solid start. But how should I say this? I wouldn't use them to not get the dude there. I guess I wouldn't use them to like we don't need one. As far as Washington with this class at the 16th pick, if Michael Mayer's there, I'm probably pulling the trigger on Michael Mayer. I love Michael Mayer. Michael Mayer is like one of the, I mean, like it's hard to do the thing of like, oh, if you pull out the position value, because it's a sort of a bullshit way to frame it. Right. But like if he did, he's assuredly top 5. Like in you know, in this class, the only thing you can nitpick about him, it's just the top end speed. He's gonna lose a foot race to Kyle Pitts. But that's where it ends.
That's saying a lot, exactly.
Right. Yeah, right. It's literally where it ends. The kid dominated from the second he stepped on the field at Notre Dame, certainly as a receiver. And you know, most people, you know, Notre Dame's on TV, so a lot of people have seen this. But like the body control, awesome. The route running, awesome. The way he uses his body is incredible. Like the body, he's got the dude pinned on his back every single time. And then when he gets the ball, now he's a berserker going down the field. And now you're going to need a couple guys to get him down, or you're going to have to do the thing that they used to do to Gronk and try to kamikaze his knees. But now he can do the low stiff arm, or he can try to hurdle you. He's a real problem when that ball's in his hands. Last year at Notre Dame, they didn't have any other weapons like at all. And their starting quarterback had gotten hurt. So then they were down to this backup, Drew Pine or whatever. Basically, Michael Mayer was the only dude they had. They just pounded him with targets. Defenses went into the game of like, we can't let Michael Mayer beat us, because if Michael Mayer doesn't beat us, we're going to beat Notre Dame. And Michael Mayer was still ripping people up. But the thing I wanted to say beyond that, because that's the obvious thing, like you watch Michael Mayer, you talk about Michael Mayer. The thing that is less appreciated about Michael Mayer, he's an awesome blocker. Yeah. Awesome blocker. And a true inline guy. Right. He is one of the best inline blocking tight ends that I've evaluated since I've been doing this, 6-7 years or whatever. And it's every single down where you get the effort. He's not one of those guys where it's like, oh, I just had a 27-yard catch for a big first down. And, now this play, it's like a run to the right or whatever, and I'm on the left. So I can sort of take it up. No, he moves guys back every single time. And it's not just from the inline spot. Notre Dame would move him around and then also use him as a lead blocker in the backfield. He's a space blocker. He's just as effective as a space blocker, like seeking the dude out and then you picking him off, knocking him backwards, as he is the inline, going up against the bigger, stronger guy that's in a phone booth. And he wins both battles consistently. So as far as being a true dual threat inline tight end, he's right up there. He's stacked like the last 5-6 classes of tight ends. And so for me, if Washington at 16, if he's still there, you got to think long and hard about that one.
Thor, before we run out of here, I am a Georgia homer. So I thought maybe we could do a couple quick hitters here on guys that I like and see what you thought. I'm super high on Kenny McIntosh. I think he's exactly what the league's looking for right now. A guy that's probably a steal in the 3rd or 4th round. What do you see when you look at Kenny McIntosh?
I agree with that. Yeah. Like, cause he sort of falls through the cracks a little bit. So, and sticking with the Georgia theme, sort of in a similar way. I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but like sort of in a similar way at the start of last pre-draft process that James Cook was. Everybody was talking about all the other running backs and stuff like that. And then James Cook, it was like, sort of like the horse race. And all of a sudden, like when we got into the home stretch a couple weeks before the draft, now we're talking about James Cook more. Now we're talking about James Cook. But it's like, oh, could James Cook actually get into day 2? Whereas like this time last year, like late February last year, people weren't saying that. And so you wonder with McIntosh, will there be a similar progression? The combine, stuff like that, we'll probably have some stuff to say about that. But I like his game a lot too. And I totally agree with the way that you frame that about being the fit for the modern NFL. You can't really nitpick him for being the like in a rotation at Georgia. Number one, because I actually think it adds value to him in the NFL because he doesn't have the wear and tear that some other guys do.
Right.
But number two, because he should be a rotational guy in the NFL as well, but not a non-valuable piece, a very valuable piece, because he's the piece that handles the passing down stuff. He's a very fluid back, and like Georgia, this most dominant team, whatever. That was the dude that they wanted catching the ball. Is that specifically on this year's team, because before then, of course, it was James Cook, and that's in part why you didn't get to see the skills of McIntosh coalesce all the time. Right. Because I mean, they've had this procession of ridiculous backs, but the times, what we got to see of him, he clearly has and NFL skills. And being the passing down back that, getting like the 50-60% usage or whatever, and just having another dude maybe that grinds it out at on the early downs, which will also sort of save McIntosh the wear and tear. Because you also don't want McIntosh going from what was he getting, like 120 touches a year, whatever, like at Georgia.
Yeah.
You don't want him going from that to like 200 plus. Like it's just not feasible, even if like right away, even if he could handle it like athletically, whatever. Like that's how you want to use him out of the shoot, and I think that's super feasible. And I think he's going to do good with that.
Nolan Smith Jr.
Yeah.
What do you see? Where do you think he goes? The injury probably set him back just a little bit, but someone's going to get, if he's not picked in the first round, then somebody got to steal because of the injury, right?
Yeah, Nolan Smith, he's a really interesting player in that he was a pain in the ass for all the SEC teams, and he's a really good player, really crafty player, really smart player. But you have a couple key question marks, I guess, on the eval that will have to be answered in Indianapolis. And the big one, you mentioned it, it's the medicals, and like, what are the teams, how are they going to see that or whatever? The other one, it's the measurements, right? He's sort of a non-traditional edge, I think this is his listing, because he hasn't been able to measure in yet during the process. But the last listing I got for him in my spreadsheet, 6'3", 237. So he's undersized, coming off of the injury or whatever. But you can't fake being by far the best pass rusher for one of the most dominant defenses that we've seen in college. Like he was their dude. Like when Georgia was like, we need to sack the quarterback here, Nolan Smith, right? So like that's you can't fake that. It was at the highest level of college football. So to me, he has already proved some of the concepts of like he can overcome the size thing, the craftiness, the moves he has coming off the edge, stuff like that. But we just need to check on the medicals. Unfortunately, he's not going to be testing, but we'll see where he measures in, and then hopefully he gets a clean bill of health.
And last one, Stetson Bennett. I think this is an interesting one. He doesn't have a lot of the stuff that you want, but he stuff that you really want, right? Where do you see him getting drafted? Where do you see him getting drafted?
Yeah, as far as Bennett, I'm a little bit. There's some people that like him, like that are might have him as like quarterback, like 7 or 8 maybe. Yeah. I have him a bit lower. I have him quarterback 12 right now in my rankings. I comp him to Ian Book. Like to me, he's like it's like more like Ian Book or Trace McSorley. Whereas the folks who love him, they all comp him to Brock Purdy, because that's it's like, oh, he could be the next Brock Purdy. Obviously there's the size thing. Obviously there's the arm strength limitations, stuff like that. The other thing that concerns me, it's a guy that didn't get onto the field until sort of later in life. And then he didn't he was very good the last couple of years, obviously playing with these loaded offenses, whatever, while he was playing against guys that were like 3 years, 4 years younger than him at all times. And so it's like, when you consider all those different things, and then I also thought he made some really poor decisions at the start of this pre-draft process. Instead of accepting Jim Nagy's invitation to the Senior Bowl, he's out getting drunk in Dallas and knocking on doors like a dumbass, and then getting cited by the Dallas police. That wasn't good. He needs to show up at the combine with a professional attitude and impress there. If he does that, he's going to get drafted. Like he'll get drafted at some point on day 3. But if he shows up with that entitled attitude, because make no mistake about it, Stetson Bennett turning down the Senior Bowl, one of the most fucking entitled things I've ever seen in a pre-draft process, honestly. It's like, bro, you're not a first-round guy. You're not a second-round guy. Like, it's ludicrous. But if he shows up with that humility, with that the thing that he started at Georgia as, I'm the underdog, I'm the guy that outworked you. That's me. Not this thing that we've seen recently of, oh, I'm Stetson Bennett, I'm the 2-time national. I don't need to go to the Senior Bowl. You guys know what Stetson's about. We need the sort of the former Stetson Bennett. He needs to understand sort of what he's up against coming from the physical package that he is. And if he combine, I think he should athletically test. We see a lot of the quarterbacks that don't athleticism, big part of his game, scrambling around, buying the time, stuff like that. And he will impress there. So I would do that. I think he's probably also going to impress in the interview rooms. If he has a big set, he's going to punch that ticket on day 3.
Thor, I know you got to run, and listen, I know you're in the middle of a blizzard out there, so be safe.
Stay safe.
Appreciate you giving us some time today. Tell the folks, what do you got coming up next? What are you working on?
Actually, it's funny going off the quarterbacks, my quarterback rankings, which are going to be out on Monday. If it wasn't for this Minnesota blizzard, they were going to be out tomorrow, but we had to postpone for a couple of days on the for Thor to chip out the driveway.
Where does Hendon Hooker on that list?
I got 6. I got him because I got McKee. I like McKee more than Hooker, but I think that's where it drops off, a bit. And then I think Hayner's in his own tier. That's at least the way that I see it. And then I think there's another drop. And then I think that's where it sort of gets into a little bit more quagmire land. So you're sort of parsing this against that, whatever. But that's sort of how I see that top 7.
Be safe, my friend. I appreciate you coming on today.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right. This is like the hardest way to end this thing.